Okay, John.
Thank you. So I would just say, just as a preface, I'm standing in supporting Susie Spindler, who's the founder of the Alliance for Coffee Excellence. She's ill, nothing so serious, but she can't travel to Poland. So I was going to be here supporting the cupping afterwards anyway. So take this presentation as my interpretation as a head judge and also a buyer of Cup of Excellence of the founder's presentation. So that's just a little preface for you there. The plan for today is, because I guess there are a few people who are definitely a little bit younger than me. So I got involved in the Cup of Excellence relatively early on in its life. So I think my first jury was 2002. And I think some people in the room were still at school then, for sure, maybe even a primary school. So some of you may not know a little bit about the history of the organization and how that works. So it's just a chance to maybe frame how Cup of Excellence sits within the world of specialty coffee, how the program works now, and then we've got 2 sets of coffees to cup. So we've got the first time in Europe to cup 5 coffees from the Peru auction. So this is the first ever time an auction has happened in Peru and a competition has happened there. So we've got 5 of the top 10 from Peru. And then I landed in Europe on Sunday, having just finished the Colombia competition. So it's the first time outside of competition that you're going to get a chance to cup 5 of the top 10 from Colombia as well. So it's a great opportunity. So we'll a little bit of chat, and then we'll do a cupping, and then if we can get the Wi-Fi to work, we're going to do a mock auction in the teams where you can all bid on your favorite coffees from the coffees that you've just cupped. Does that make sense? Good. Rightio. So, in terms of kind of Cup of Excellence, it's very much a process, it's a democratic process of quality discovery, and it really promotes the desire to produce quality and produce in country, and it actually creates a rationale for production of quality. If we go back to when the competition first started, most coffee just got bulked into commodity lots. I think when I first started chatting to the Colombian national jury, I said, you know, like if I go back to the first Colombian coffee I bought, I could buy Colombian Excelso, or if I was really lucky, I could buy Colombian Medellin Excelso. And there was no traceability beyond that. And what the Cup of Excellence done is it's created a rationale for producers to want to do something better, to make the best they can. But it also, with that, it gives them the chance to get the visibility and the recognition on a global platform that previously didn't exist. If you go back to 1999, there was no system to allow individual producers to get recognition on the global coffee market. So it's very much about, you know, getting people to prepare, to work, and to build. And through a set of juries, pre-selection jury, national jury, and then international jury, get the chance to win and to get the recognition. And here is that first 1999 experiment. So this was in Brazil. It wasn't yet called the Cup of Excellence, but if you take Brazil, it was very much seen as the commodity origin, world's biggest coffee producing country, world's biggest Arabica producing country, but a country that produced big commodity bulks. People knew in the supply chain there were amazing coffees out there, but they didn't know exactly where those coffees were. People didn't know regions like Mantiqueira. Hadn't heard of Araponga, you know, like, or even just some different areas of Sul de Minas. And this was a chance where those producers could then start to get those recognition. So that was 1999, the first one. It was Best of Brazil. It was a gourmet project. It was funded in partnership with the United Nations, trying to deliver value addition into the supply chain. And that's very much still what the Cup of Excellence is about. So it's now run by an organization called the Alliance for Coffee Excellence, and they manage the Cup of Excellence programs, but then they also look after some training programs, and also supporting and advocating for quality production across the world. And central to the ACE's kind of idea is, and rationale is, the idea of sustainability for coffee producers. A lot of that is through good processing and good farm management, but also importantly in terms of price discovery. You know, we live in a world where coffee generally still has quite subdued pricing and is really important. If you look at 1999, when the first Best of Brazil started, that was just at the start of the first coffee crisis. By the time we hit 2002, when the first Nicaragua competition hit, that was when we were in the real depths of the coffee crisis, when coffee was selling on the New York Sea for 40, 50 cents per pound. At the same time, producers were then discovering much, much higher pricing through Cup of Excellence. So it's about price sustainability and it's about recognition for producer. So as we can see here, we started off in Brazil. And by the time we hit 2001, we have a different cupping form. And I'm going to talk you through that cupping form as well. So some of you may have seen it. Some of you may have used it. It's a little bit different from some of the other cupping forms there. So I'll give you a chance to walk through it in a little minute. So that was when the COE cupping form was developed and the Cup of Excellence name was created. And that's when we started off in Guatemala. And from there on, over the next few years, we rolled out the program predominantly into Central America. Just looking at somewhere like El Salvador there as well, and that's really helped other countries within Latin America and beyond break out of that commodity reputation as well. El Salvador sort of was very much seen as a secondary Central American coffee. If you go back to the 1990s, it's now seen as an origin which is central to most people's specialty coffee origin offering. You know, like areas like Chalatenango hadn't been discovered until Cup of Excellence came along as well. So coffees which you will hold in your portfolio have got the recognition and have found a place in the market because of COE. So we worked through kind of 2003 with El Salvador, and then we moved on to Honduras. Again, regions like Santa Barbara being discovered out of Honduras. And then we move on Colombia, Costa Rica. And the great thing then 2008, when we move into Rwanda and then Burundi, when we move into the African competitions, you know, we're still trying to sort of expand as a program into Africa as well. You know, there's ongoing discussions with some of the other East African countries, and it takes years. Peru's just come on board in 2017, but those negotiations to get Peru on board and to get the quality coming through for Peru, it's taken 10 years of negotiation to get that program up and running. So, you know, as an organization, we are working, and we've got other countries hopefully coming on stream as time goes on. Just to go into a little bit of detail about some of what I just mentioned there about money. So if I look at that period from 1999 through to just now, we've still got 3 auctions to go before the end of 2017, but up to now we've delivered back to origin and delivered back to producers $54.5 million in terms of the supply chain. And that's just in the auction coffees. I think what you also have to understand is Cup of Excellence is designed as a program to build links between producers and roasters. It's not just about buying that auction lot. It's about then building a relationship with that producer and going back year in, year out, because you know as a buyer they can produce that quality. So going back and those repeat purchases, so it's been worth millions more in terms of value-added repeat purchases in terms of the supply chain. If I look at some of those prices, the average price in Brazil in 1999 looks really small now at $1.72 with a maximum price of $2.60 a pound. You know, it's still relatively small. As I mentioned, though, that was when we were entering what was now known as the coffee crisis, where we hit really, really extraordinarily low prices that were 2-3 times below the cost of production for producers. So that was this early part of quality discovery, but then since then we've just seen a constant rise in the average price going through to the producers. Costa Rica this year, the average price, I think there were about 25 auction lots, the average price of the auction lot was $17.76 per pound. So what's that in euros? Like 35 euros per kilo or something like that. And that was the average price. It's really really, really high pricing. And then in terms of some of the top prices, you know, we're hitting $100 per pound for Honduras coffee, for Mexican coffee. Both are origins that have always been seen as commodity bulk fillers, you know, blending coffees, but we know there are amazing coffees out there, and it's that process of discovery and of recognition that we're doing. This year so far, the average price for coffee is $14.28 per pound. And that just graphs it on a chart for you there. And I think going back to mentioning the C market, you say the C market at the minute, to this week, I think is resting around about 130 cents per pound. So the C market itself isn't really evolving in terms of its overall pricing. It's not taking into recognition the fact that the cost of production is going up. It doesn't take into account the actual cost of production and the extra effort that it takes for people to make specialty coffee. Specialty coffee is more expensive to make than commodity coffee, so the producers need a higher recognition and a higher cost base. And programs like COE allow, and it stands a chance of breaking that price ceiling and allowing producers to get a sustainable, fair price for what they're doing. In terms of winning lots, I would say that the program is incredibly the amount of scrutiny in the program is huge. You know, it's taken us from 1999 to now, and we've still only hit 3,200 winning lots. So if you average that out over a number of years, you can see how few coffees actually get that reward. You're looking at somewhere between 15 and 25 coffees per competition will actually get recognition as a Cup of Excellence winning coffee. They have to go through 5 rounds to get to that. And within that as well, I think the important thing is that 2,500 of those 3,000 farmers, you know, had never a first-time winners. The guy who finished second in Colombia this year, it was the first crop he'd ever had on his farm, and he finished second. It's amazing coffee. It's worth. I've not got that one actually, but yes, you're seeing individual small producers first year coming through, hitting second place. The guy who won in Colombia, that was the first time he'd ever entered and won. So you're seeing new producers coming through. So when you think, we've discovered all of the producers we know all the micro regions we're ever going to know. Coffee quality changes, varieties are changing, climate change is affecting where we can and can't grow coffee. So like that process of quality discovery is ever changing. And I think it's that recognition of first-time farmers and giving people constantly that time to get a voice and a chance to show their coffee on a global level is hugely important in terms of the competition. As I mentioned, quality discovery there for the producer is really important. It gives them a voice. It gives them those higher prices. It allows that direct trade development. Direct trade didn't exist before Cup of Excellence. It wasn't even a term before Cup of Excellence. And if you look at the people, particularly in the States, who really pushed direct trade as a model, you know, people like Jeff Watts, Peter Giuliano, they were there in the juries in 2003, 2004. They met the relationships that they made with producers through Cup of Excellence. And they wouldn't have got, those producers wouldn't have had the visibility without that program. So how we know and how we work as buyers in specialty could not have existed without that. So that direct trade development, and that is really central as well. You know, the program is there not to be that first time. It's there to be repeat purchase. We want people to be there 10 years later, still having a relationship. And then kind of the other side of things is that infrastructure development. We can see changes in cup quality coming as a result of climate change as well. So we can see shift in pattern about where coffee can and cannot be grown. If I take Colombia last week, I think 10 of the top 25 producers, their farms are at 2,000 meters above sea level. And there's a reason why people are moving up the slopes. And it's not just about the desire to be able to build better quality coffee and to make better quality coffee. That's a central desire for them. But climate change is a real thing. If you go to places like Chalatenango in El Salvador, it's dry. Like the whole of El Salvador is just so much drier than it was a decade ago. So the reason why the El Salvador auction this year in Cup of Excellence was completely almost dominated by honey processed coffees, by natural processed coffees. I think there are only 2 wash processed coffees in there. That is a climate change. And so we're really seeing things like that happening as a direct result. So often what is happening in terms of Cup of Excellence is a window into what is happening in that producing country. And what you will start to see is a buyer in a couple of years' time. You know, people need to use less water in El Salvador. And, you know, it is slightly a response to the buyer's desire for these quite exotic profiles, but primarily it's a desire to say, I can't use water because I don't have the water availability that I did 10 years ago. And if you go back to the original El Salvador competition, it was all wash coffee. No one did natural processed coffee. No one did honey processed coffee. So it's really this evolution of what you're seeing there. And I think the people behind it is also really, like, that's central to it as well. There has to be a relationship. There has to be an individual. And this is a quote Susie's put up just from Enio Perez in Guatemala. And it kind of encapsulates a lot of what I was saying just there. So prior to Cup of Excellence, all the coffee on the farm just went to a bulk exporter. They didn't separate varieties. They weren't interested in separating varieties. There was no rationale or desire in terms of price or recognition to separate varieties off, to do something different with processing, to start experimenting with different ways to process coffee, whether it be through different ways of fermentation or different harvesting techniques and so on. And then by allowing the direct relationship with roasters and then giving a platform to build that direct relationship with roasters, it's about being able to get price recognition year in, year out, and also to bring people back to the supply chain. If I look at Colombia, the average age of a Colombian coffee farmer is in their mid to late 50s. This is a structural problem facing Colombia. Now, what's happening is we've got 6 coffees that are entering the auction in November, which scored an average of 90 points and up. Now, that is going to get farmers in their 20s and 30s excited to stay in coffee. If we don't get farmers excited to stay in coffee in Latin America, there will be a huge movement away from the land. People will move to the cities because there's no reason to get involved. There's no reason to be part of a farm life which isn't delivering any money back to the family, whereas changing the pricing structure, changing the rationale and getting recognition in a global platform encourages people to want to come and stay part of the industry. In terms of like obviously it's going to impact the producers, and I think what I've also mentioned there, I mentioned a couple of companies like Counterculture, like Intelligentsia, and they were very much at the beginning of Cup of Excellence's journey in the States, and they were part of the program. And they're roasteries that like they're well known on a global level, and they're well known on a global level because quality and relationship is central to who they are. So what you're seeing as well consistently is organizations that continue to be involved with Cup of Excellence as a program, those that are globally recognized. People go, oh yeah, they're a good roaster, they're a great importer. They are very much kind of at the forefront of what they're doing. They're supporting the industry. They're working with producers. We've got visibility. We've got transparency through the supply chain. So it impacts on them. And then it goes, obviously it's delivering great coffee back to producers as well. But there's a relationship all through that. I was talking earlier on today, and I'm talking about, we're in specialty coffee because we're interested in relationships. If we're only interested in numbers and volume, we would work in commodity coffee. But we're not. We're here for relationships on many, many levels. And that is really central to, you'll see lots of photographs of individuals because it's very much, specialty coffee is a large family and it's central to the Cup of Excellence ideology. In terms of roaster retailers, I think, as I mentioned, recognizing for selling the top quality, we can all talk about, oh yeah, this is great, I scored this 89 points in my lab, but there's no way to prove that it's an 89-point coffee. Whereas if you buy a Cup of Excellence coffee and it says 89 points, 90 points, 91 points, that is a panel of cuppers from all around the world who've come together, and that's their average score. So it's a proven cup score on a coffee. Whereas you can score anything in your lab, 90 points, but there's no transparency, there's no proof. So that's one of the things. It's about that recognition for selling the top quality and a proven top quality. It's also a chance to develop your own skills. Again, last week, chatting with the international jury, one of the first things I said, look, this will be the first time a lot of you have cupped 40 coffees from the same origin in one day. I know how often do you stand a chance to do that? So you're looking at 5 different micro-regions, a mixture of process and variety, and you sit there in your cup and go, these are all great coffees. Now, how are they different? How is terroir creating different quality? How is different fermentation creating different quality? And how do I understand what I buy as Colombian coffee within the context of what a national jury has presented to us as quality? So it's a really great chance to build your own cupping skills. I'll carry on. So yeah, and in terms of that as well, I think, you know, we all get stuck in our own little buying models and go, I like coffee from this region. I'm not so sure about this region. And one of the things that being on a Cup of Excellence jury and being involved with the program does is it tries to break down our subjectivity as cuppers. We all have it and we have preferences, but you know, if we're professional cuppers, really we should be working objectively and going, this is quality. It's different from what I know, but this is quality. And what you've seen with Cup of Excellence is the discovery of new regions only through the program. So like Mantiqueira in Brazil, you know, they always knew there was great coffee there, but it didn't fit the model of natural process coffees. They processed their coffee through pulp natural and wash process, and had traditionally done that for 30, 40 years, long before it became common practice in Brazil, and they knew their coffees were different. And then when people through Cup of Excellence program started to cup these super clean mango, orange, caramel driven coffees with acidity, and going, what's this? This is Brazil. This is not supposed to be happening on the cupping table. So it's the discovery of micro-regions like that that really happen as well. Discovery of new varieties. You know, you've got things like Pacamara in El Salvador. You know, it was seen as a volume new variety hybrid to try and sort of bulk up producers, and people didn't see it as a quality variety. I'm sure most of you as roasters have had a Pacamara within your portfolio at some point, and it got visibility and recognition through the El Salvador program. And that's that it's kind of a virtuous circle through there. So as you go through, better quality, more investment through. And that's very much what it's about. So, in terms of the program, there are a number of stages to a Cup of Excellence program. The first stage is, and like any program, will start about 6 months before you think it does. So like a lot of the countries have like local radio. So Guatemala, if you go into national radio and you tune in on a Friday afternoon, you've got like the coffee hour where you can kind of listen to what's going on in coffee. So there's kind of call for samples going through there. People saying, right, your crop's about to start. Make sure you do your best picking, save that off for Cup of Excellence. So that's starting at the beginning of the harvest, October, November time in Guatemala. So they then continue on. There's then a pre-selection stage, and what happens with there is, so any producer completely democratically just goes, right, I've got 3 kilos of parchment or dried pod that fits a micro lot that I think is my best quality, and they can submit that free of charge to the program, and then that gets cupped in a pre-selection phase. So typically you can get anywhere from maybe 150 samples. So some of the smaller countries like Costa Rica, relatively small production, you know, they get maybe 150 samples. And then you go through to, typically in Brazil, I think they've just had 400 for the natural process in Brazil. Rwanda, you might get 400, same in Burundi. And I think the record was about 1,000 samples in Colombia one year. And then all of those samples get assessed. And then you take the best 150 through to a national phase. Now, in between the national phase and the pre-selection phase, what happens is the producer then has to say, okay, I've passed the pre-selection phase. I now need to deliver my lot into a bonded warehouse. So they have to then deliver that coffee into a warehouse where it stays in the custody of the program for the rest of the time until it's bagged and shipped and sold or released for not passing through. And then so we go through a national phase where everything is cupped. We can take a maximum of 40 coffees now to the international phase. So the pre-selection and national phase are cupped by an expert panel like these of national cuppers, and to be on the national jury you have to pass a test. And when was the last time you took a cupping test? It's quite a hard thing to do and to maybe think about doing, but yeah, so to be on the national jury, you have to go and you have to cup 3-4 tables of coffee, and then you have to have your performance analysed statistically to say these cuppers can score different qualities accurately, they're consistent across cupping table to cupping table, and they're fair and they use the cupping form. That's a hard thing to do. I can't remember the last one. I think last year I did a cupping exam for the first time in about 15 years. And it was hard, it was scary. But to be on the national jury, you have to do it every single year. So this is a national jury, which then selects the best ones. And then we bring in an international jury from around the world, ideally made up of 50% men, 50% women, and then from different buying groups from all around the world as well. So you've got people from Japan, Korea, Northern Europe, Southern Europe, States, all coming in, and these are potential buyers. And then we cup those, and anything which scores 86 or more then goes onto the internet auction as a platform. So I think we'll go through here. Go through the cupping form now. I guess this isn't going to go back on. What we can do, actually, could we just grab all the cupping forms, and then if we just hand out the cupping forms and I can talk you through it, it'll make much more sense. There we go. That's a little bit better. So we've got 8 scoring attributes on the cupping form, and here's looking at a couple of them. So it's a little bit different. Basically what we're looking for, right in the middle of any Venn diagram, that's what we're aiming for with Cup of Excellence, is right in the center of there that we're aiming for. And some of these attributes are scored in a very different way. And I'll probably kind of hands up who uses SCA regularly, cupping form. Some people, internal forms. And who's used COE cupping form before? Hands up. I've got a few people, it's great. So, yeah, I think there are 3 main areas which are a little bit different, which is clean and sweet and acidity. And those are treated in a very different way in the cupping form. And the way, predominantly, just starting with sweetness and cleanness, is the idea with, I suppose if you look at SCA, it's designed to say, is a coffee specialty or not? And so that's like the primary goal of the cupping form. And then with Cup of Excellence, it's a little bit different because we're hopefully working with coffees that are a minimum of specialty quality and higher. So it's about quality discovery. So with cleanness and sweetness, we're actually looking for the level of clarity and the level of sweetness in the cup. So looking for things like you need good harvesting to produce sweet, clean coffee, and you need good processing to produce clean coffee. So anything that we're looking at, we're interested in the level of clarity and the level of sweetness, not just kind of a binary, is it clean and is it sweet? It's about how clean and how sweet. And I think that's one of the fundamental differences. And it's a different cupping form and it has a different goal. And each form has its role in specialty coffee, and neither one is better than the other. It's just it has a different methodology. And I think that's the thing. And important to that as well, basically an 86, which is like the base passing mark for Cup of Excellence, is not 86 on an SCA. Because the form looks different, has different attributes, has different scales, it's non-linear, it can never be the same. There might be a point at which quality will pass, but they're not always linear in terms of their scores. And I think that's one of the things that people find most confusing with cupping forms, is to go, oh, well, I would score this an 86 on SCA, so I should be an 86 on COE, yeah? But that's not the case. So try and treat it in a non-linear way, and it makes it much easier to work with. And then we've got acidity, mouthfeel, flavor we score, aftertaste and finish and balance. But we'll go through some of these attributes now. So to start off with, and again, slightly different, here's the cupping form, so we'll go through. Different from SCA is the aroma is not scored. And then I think that's one of the main things is, the first thing you got on SCA is you would score the aroma. We don't do that on COE, but you have the similar area to look at the roast color. Defects are scored a little bit different. And we generally deal with all the defects in pre-selection that we're looking at as well. They also have a slightly higher rating because this is a competition to find amazing coffee. So defects are kind of higher scored a little bit as well as a negative score to really kick anything which is negative off. And then start off with, just like I mentioned here, we have clean and sweet. And you can see here as well, where the quality rank there, it goes 0, 4, 6, 7, 8. So it's a non-linear scale. So we're looking at kind of 6 as our standard specialty quality, and then we can go up in half points as well, something which is slightly different from SCA. We go in half points, and the idea is you want to separate really good qualities off from good qualities. So rather than using quarter point increments, you use half point increments from 6 and up. So we have our 8 scoring categories, and again, a little bit different, we only go up to 8. Now, those of you good at the maths, you go 8 times 8 is 64, so we add a base of 36 to everything, and that should hopefully make 100. I have seen people score 100 for coffees in cupping form. There was Ilin Herto one year, and one of the national cuppers got up and waved his form and said, "I cannot fault this, 100 points." As I mentioned, clean and sweet, no problems or off flavors. As with anything, you're looking for this murkiness, concrete dirtiness that we're looking for, and trying to remove all of that in terms of clarity. And it comes from good harvesting and processing, as does sweet. And one of the things about sweetness, it positively modifies the sensory quality of other attributes as well, particularly things like acidity and mouthfeel and persistence. The relative level of sweetness will positively impact on that. On the flip side, you're into stringency with your kind of more commercial coffees. And then moving through, in terms of sweetness. And that's one of the things you'll find on the cupping table. This is the first time I've cupped the Peruvian coffee, so I can't say anything for them yet. I'm looking forward to them. But I know from the Colombian coffees, the exceptional level of sweetness is really just stand out in this. Super clean, super sweet coffees. And then when we look at our acids, now SCA has changed a little bit over time as a form, and it does look at quality of acidity now, but when the COE form was originally put together, it was more about quality of acidity rather than intensity of acidity as well. So what we're looking at with acidity is a combination of the common fruit acids that you see in coffee. So you've got your sort of basic citric acid, but then also combinations of malic acid and tartaric acid. And this was designed in some ways to deal with what was happening with Brazilian coffee, to allow for the recognition of Brazilian coffee. Because as you'll know from your customer base, acidity is a great thing in coffee, and like high acid coffees, generally coffee professionals will score high acid coffee, high intensity acid coffees highly. But what we're really interested in is the quality of that acidity, because a lot of consumers don't like high intensity acidity, but they will always recognize high quality acidity. And when you look at a lot of really good Brazilian coffees, they're not so intense in the acidity, but they have a persistent high quality acid that has combinations of those fruit acids in terms of the aftertaste and acidity perception. So that's one of the other things which is really central to the form, is how we look at acidity. So we've got citric acid, and then what we're not looking to score down in terms of quality are things like acetic and lactic acid. Sometimes, particularly with poorer quality natural processing, you'll see things like acetic acid becoming a little bit too strong, particularly as the coffee cools. So it's trying to recognize that and separate it and say, this is not such a high quality. And then also looking for some more bitter acids, like your chlorogenic acid and your quinic acids, and scoring those down again a little bit. Some coffees will have phosphoric acid as well. You know, Kenyan coffee is quite famous for its phosphoric acid content, and occasionally it's recognizing that in terms of the cupping form and scoring it appropriately. As I mentioned as well, relative sweetness, relative saltiness will also impact on your perception of acidity. And that's how we'll deal with it on the form as well. So you can see here we have our quality scale, and then the intensity you score up like that. Individual flavor attributes as well. We're looking at kind of positive flavor attributes, how those are scored. Again, looking for quality. What we're looking for is a multitude of flavor attributes. And what you tend to find with the COE form is that rather than being compartmentalized, that like it becomes a virtuous circle of quality. So if a coffee is super clean and super sweet, the cleaner it is, the more flavor attributes you'll notice. So the less clean it is, the less flavor attributes you'll notice. So it's just allowing, the cleaner the processing, the easier it is to score. And then one of the other things as well, which is important, and also bear this in consideration for later on, is that when we're in competition, what we're doing is we're doing long 45-minute cupping sessions, really intense analysis of the sensory profile of a coffee, whereas here we've got like a limited time span to put the coffees on. So you may or may not get some of the flavor attributes that you see on the auction site or on the descriptors there, but that's okay. You know, over time, as the coffee cool, in optimum brewing conditions, you would get those. And then the combination of those all comes together. Descriptors as well, they're really important because, and if you look on the Cup of Excellence website, you'll see specific attributes as well, and allows people to choose coffees. If they don't get a chance to get an auction set and cup them themselves, but they want to bid online, it gives them a chance to then bid for those coffees based on the flavor profiles that the jury have put together. In terms of scoring, as you work through, as I mentioned, you've got these linear sort of the rank from 0 to 8, but kind of in terms of the higher levels that obviously we're looking at today. So 6 would be your ordinary specialty, and then you can go up 6, 6.5, 7, 7.5, and 8 for optimum. So anything which scores 86 on average, which would be at least 6s across the board, plus either 2 7s or an extra couple of bits. You can see they're really good quality. That's our Cup of Excellence selection. Anything which gets 90 points or more gets a presidential award from the producer, which is, for the producer, that is an amazing. To say your coffee scores an average of 90 points or more, you know, these are pretty exceptional coffees. So Peru's first on here. And here are the Peruvian samples we've got. On the table, we're going to brew up in a second. You'll see the coffees laid out. And then these are the producers. Those are the scores. And we've got some flavor descriptors on the table there as well. We've got 19 winners, 4 scoring 90 or more from 314. And Peru is a super exciting country. I think it's got years of quality discovery ahead of it. And, you know, I mean, this is just the start. So super exciting to cup these first time around. And then Colombia. Colombia is an origin which is central to specialty coffee quality and has been there through the whole journey of specialty coffee. But like I mentioned, there are some of the producers, this was the first time they entered. So we've still got quality discovery taking place in Colombia. What we're going to do now, I'll come back to the auction bit in a little bit. I think it's time to cup these, and then we can come back, and then we're going to talk you through the mock auction. Great? Yep. All good? Thank you very much.
A question on the sample roasting. How do you make sure that the profiles are consistent in origin?
Yes, so a couple of people have asked that as we were going around. What we try to do is that, I suppose the thing with sample roasting is you're trying to let the coffees do the work, not the profiles. So typically in competition, what we would do is we use Cropster for everything. So everything gets logged, all the water activity, all the total moisture in terms of the green coffees. And so we can trace every single sample in terms of its loading up onto the system, and every time it gets roast through the program, then we have a roast to show what happens. Typically, each program will have about 3 separate roast profiles. So we'll have a standard traditional bean size profile, we'll have a natural process stroke honey process profile, and then we'll have a large bean profile. So we'll separate by the raw material into those 3, and then we kind of follow the curve and we sort of roast within extremely tight roast limits on there. So I use roast goals on Cropster, which if you don't use roast goals in your roastery, do, because it will keep your sample quality and your sort of roast consistency much, much higher. So we map everything through there. We have an automatic kick out for anything that doesn't pass those roast goals, and then everything that goes on the cupping table has to pass a roast cupping QC. So basically, if I cup 70 coffees in competition, I have to do 70 extra roast QCs as well through there. So yeah, that's how we do it.
Any more questions?
A question, I mean, I'd love to go to Origin and be involved in a jury, but in terms of being involved remotely, maybe it's just because I was in Australia, but I had problems with getting the samples very late and not having time to effectively assess them. Do you know anything about that, whether that's been improved or...
Yeah, and it's very hard. What we try to do and how the competition works is every time a coffee is a winning coffee, they mill it and pack it, and then the auction samples are taken from that. So it's exactly what it is, a pre-shipment sample. It's a representative pre-shipment sample that you get. For some countries, it's a little bit harder, but we try to make sure that there's a really good amount of time. And for example, we've just pushed back the Burundi auction because all the samples that went to Japan from the Burundi samples got held in Port Authority. So where there are circumstances, we will try and push back an auction to help potential buyers get to roast and cup them. Because it's a lot of samples as well, 30 samples to roast and cup and score and prepare a buying plan. So yeah, we do try. So yeah.
Okay, no more questions. Right.
I am home free.
Okay, so thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Let's give him